The Recovery Kernel. Amends to self. The reconciliation framework. You are the first person you owe something to. Before we begin, the honest frame. Classical Building the Centurian. This guide does not tell you not to make amends to others. It tells you to make them to yourself first, and to know the truth about the rest. The traditional amends framework exists for a reason. Acknowledging harm caused, taking responsibility, attempting repair, these are genuine moral goods. This guide does not argue against them. What this guide argues against is the specific way the amends process is frequently practiced, as an extended, other-directed performance of contrition that the person in recovery is expected to repeat indefinitely, to people who will not genuinely receive it, while their own recovery, their body, their cognition, their finances, their sense of self, waits. The person who spends 6 months trying to make amends to a family that will not forgive them, while their liver enzymes are still elevated and their savings are zero and their sleep architecture is destroyed, has misallocated the most finite resource in recovery, focused attention. Attention dispersed across the unmovable will not move it. Attention directed at what is actually movable, the body, the mind, the finances, the daily structure, produces results. This guide is about where the attention actually belongs. Section 1, Amends to Self, the Primary Obligation. Classical Building the Centurian. The person most wronged by the addiction is the one reading this page. Every framework for amends begins with the harm done to others. Almost none begins with the harm done to self, as if the person in recovery is not also a person who deserved better than what the addiction provided. The body you live in was depleted, damaged, and neglected. The mind you think with was impaired, deceived, and narrowed. The heart that you feel with was isolated, hardened against genuine connection, and trained to prioritize the substance over everything it actually needed. These are harms. They are serious harms. They require amends. Amends to self is not self-pity. It is the recognition that the person most consistently present for every consequence of the addiction, the person who lived through every withdrawal, every morning after, every broken commitment, every hour of the life that was consumed, is the same person now being asked to rebuild. That person is owed something. 1.1, the amends inventory, what you owe yourself. 1.2, the self-amends statement. Write this out. In your own words. Do not read it to anyone. It is for you. The format below is a starting point, revise it until it is accurate. Section 2, the honest truth about external forgiveness. Classical Building the Centurian, what the frameworks say will happen and what actually happens are different. The amends process in most recovery frameworks assumes a certain model of human response. You come in honesty, you take full responsibility, you demonstrate changed behavior over time, and the people you harmed, with variable timelines and some difficult conversations, genuinely forgive and the relationship is repaired. This model is not wrong as an ideal. It describes what healthy, emotionally mature people with secure attachment and genuine generosity of spirit can do. It describes what is possible. What the framework does not adequately prepare people for is the statistical reality of what actually happens more often. The truth, most people do not genuinely forgive at the depth that was hoped for. 2.1, Why this happens, the neuroscience of trust. The person who was harmed by the addiction has experienced a real violation of the trust architecture that the brain uses to predict safe behavior in relationships. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, updates its predictions based on lived experience. A deeply trusted person who was discovered to have been lying activates the amygdala's threat model in a way that a stranger's deception does not. The result, even when the prefrontal cortex, the rational, deliberate part of the brain, makes the conscious decision to forgive, the amygdala continues to run its threat detection program. The person experiences the relationship with a specific background vigilance that they may not even be consciously aware of. They are not being dishonest when they say they forgive you. They are experiencing a split, the deliberate choice to forgive and the involuntary threat detection response that the history wrote into their nervous system. This is not a character flaw on their part. It is how the brain works. And it is why the forgiveness that was performed by the prefrontal cortex does not fully override the wariness that the amygdala is running. The implication for the person in recovery: you are asking the other person to override a learned threat response with a deliberate decision. That override requires extraordinary sustained effort on their part. Many people cannot maintain it indefinitely, not because they don't love you, but because the neurological cost of overriding the threat response is genuinely high. When their life becomes more demanding in other ways, the first thing to go is the effortful relationship maintenance. 2.2 The permanent identity problem. Classical building the Centurian, "You're still lying," the most corrosive phrase in early recovery relationships. There is a specific dynamic in post-addiction family relationships that deserves its own section because it is so common and so destructive: the assumption that any behavioral difficulty, any normal human inconsistency, any bad day, any unexplained absence, is evidence of ongoing deception or relapse. The parent who says, "You're still lying." The partner who says, "I can't tell anymore." The friend who says, "That's what you said last time." All of these are the threat detection system running its program, but the effect on the person in recovery is to make normal human imperfection unacceptable. They are not allowed to have bad days without those bad days being interpreted as evidence of their permanent identity as an unreliable person. The truth: the person who has to perform wellness to maintain a relationship is not in a recovery supporting relationship. They are in a performance relationship. That distinction matters enormously for the sustainability of recovery. Section 3, The Begging Trap. Classical building the Centurian, begging for forgiveness is not an amends. It is a request to be released from guilt, which only the person doing the begging can actually grant. There is a specific moment in the amends process that gets repeated, in treatment centers, in meetings, in painful kitchen table conversations, where the person in recovery begins to beg. Not ask. Beg. Please forgive me. I know I hurt you. I know what I did. Please just tell me you forgive me. I can't keep going if you don't. This begging has several features that make it the opposite of what recovery requires. 3.1 The Enslavement Model. The phrase that captures this precisely: it enslaves them. The person in recovery who is waiting for external forgiveness as the condition for moving forward has placed their own growth in the hands of someone who may not be able or willing to grant it, ever. This is not a growth model. It is a holding pattern sustained by hope that may never be fulfilled. 3.2 The Time Accounting. This is the calculation the begging trap never asks the person to run. Section 4, Relationship Triage, which connections are worth the investment. Classical building the Centurian, not all relationships survive addiction. Not all of them should. Relationship triage is the application of the same principle as financial triage: limited resources must be directed toward where they produce the most return. The person in recovery has limited emotional bandwidth, limited time, and limited energy. These must be allocated strategically. This is not a cold or heartless calculation. It is an honest one. The relationship that consistently produces shame, re-exposure to the permanent identity label, and the begging dynamic is consuming resources that the recovery needs. The relationship that produces genuine support, honest reflection, and allows the person to grow beyond their addiction history is an asset. 4.1 The Relationship Assessment Matrix. 4.2 The Family Unit, Specific and Difficult. The family unit deserves its own section because the dynamics are more entrenched and the stakes feel higher. Parents, siblings, children, these relationships carry a weight that friendships do not, and the triage logic feels more brutal applied here. The honest truth about the family unit in post-addiction recovery. Parents who experienced the addiction as a prolonged trauma to their family are running a threat detection program that was formed by years of lived experience. Their hypervigilance is real, earned, and not easily overridden by evidence of change, because the evidence of change was promised multiple times before and not maintained. Siblings often carry the resentment of having been the functional one during the family's years of managing the addiction, the one who got less attention, who covered for the person, who managed the parent's anxiety. This resentment is rarely expressed directly. It manifests as a specific kind of coldness or distance. Children of people who were addicted carry the most complex attachment pattern. They needed the parent who was not reliably present. The reunion is not straightforwardly joyful. It is complicated by grief for the childhood that was lost, confusion about whether the parent can now be trusted, and often an already developed self-sufficiency that the parent's recovery does not feel entirely necessary. None of these responses makes the family members bad people. All of them are the natural consequence of what addiction does to families. And all of them create a recovery environment where genuine repair takes longer than the frameworks suggest, requires more from both sides than the frameworks acknowledge, and sometimes, honestly, does not arrive within the timeline the person in recovery needs to sustain their recovery. The reframe for family relationships: the goal is not to get back what was. The goal is to build something new, a different relationship, based on the actual current people, not on the pre-addiction ideal that existed before the relationship was damaged. This takes years, not months. It requires the family members to do their own work, not only watch the person in recovery do theirs. A family therapist who is not invested in performing reconciliation is the most appropriate guide for this process. The forward model. Service and love. Section 5, the service model. Classical building the Centurian. Service is the amends that does not require anyone to receive it to be complete. The difference between the begging model and the service model is this: in the begging model, the amends is complete only when the other person accepts it. In the service model, the amends is complete when it is made, regardless of who receives it or whether they acknowledge it. Service is the act of contributing to others in ways that are not contingent on a specific individual's response. It does not require the people you harmed to benefit from the service. It does not require anyone to know your history. It does not require forgiveness as its completion condition. It is giving without the begging structure. 5.1 Service as Pharmacology. The Recovery Kernel's natural architecture framework identifies contribution and service as producing the specific neurochemical combination: dopamine, the effort reward, oxytocin, the connection, and endorphins, the social bonding, that the substances were approximating. Service is not merely morally good. It is pharmacologically specific to what recovery needs. 5.2 The service as amends reframe. Service to people you did not specifically harm is still an amend to the harm you caused, because it is contribution to the world rather than extraction from it. The harm the addiction caused created a net depletion, from the people around you, from the community, from the world you inhabit. Service creates a net contribution. The ledger is not closed by apology. It is closed by contribution. This is not a transactional model. It is not, I did bad things to these people, so I will do good things to these other people and they will cancel out. It is a different framework entirely. The recovery from addiction is most completely expressed not in how thoroughly you apologize for the past but in how genuinely you contribute to the future. Section 6, the love model. Classical building the Centurian. Love is not the same as needing to be forgiven. It does not require the other person to respond correctly. The final and most important element of the forward model. The love that the recovery process needs, and that the begging model blocks, is the love that is not contingent. Not conditional. Not waiting for a specific response before it can be expressed. The begging model is not love. It is the performance of love as a strategy for receiving forgiveness. The other person can feel the difference. It is part of why genuine forgiveness is so difficult to give when the amends feel strategic rather than genuine. 6.1 What love actually looks like in recovery. 6.2 Love as the long amends. The best amends to the people who were harmed is not the apology. It is the life. The life that is built in recovery, the rebuilt body, the restored cognition, the stable finances, the genuine service, the real connections, is the evidence that something real happened. It does not require them to acknowledge it. It does not require them to be present for it. The life is the amends regardless of whether anyone witnesses it as such. The family member who claimed they would never trust you again may, 5 years from now, see a life so clearly changed that the trust restructures itself without any further conversation about it. Or they may not. Some relationships do not repair regardless of the quality of the recovery. But the life was worth building either way. Not for them. For you. And then, from the foundation of that built life, genuinely for others. The forward summary. Classical building: the Centurian, service and love. Forward, not backward. Contribution, not contrition. Recovery Kernel: Amends to Self-Crisis, 988 SAMHSA, 1-800-662-4357. Read with, the full inventory: the Stay Non-Addicted Guide, the Substance-Specific Series. The life is the amends. Build it.